Looks like the bitch apple doesn't fall far from the bitch tree. Good evening and welcome back to another episode of Venom's Vault. I'm your hostess, Venom, the plus-size vampire MILF of South Texas. And tonight we are pretty in pink, killed in couture, because we are diving headfirst into the whodunit drama and campy chaos that is Ryan Murphy's 2015 series, Scream Queens. We're talking iconic outfits, over-the-top deaths, and why Chanel Oberlin just might be one of horror's best final girls, whether she deserves it or not. So grab your earmuffs and your alibidibuddy, and let's get into it. So starting off this new episode of Venom's Vault, I am using a new recording setup. I'm using just one camera as opposed to two this time. I hope you can still see Toxin and Poison in the background, and I'm honestly liking the better quality so far. I'm also coming to you in flat hair. I know, this is not normally the hair that I wear. I usually wear something styled and curled, as you can see behind me. I'm trying to give you a little bit of Chanel number 13 vibes. I know that there was only like 11 in the show, but Chanel number 4 got meningitis anyway, so who cares? So here I am with this flat hair. It's blonde. It has a little bit of teasing in it because I cannot wear flat hair to save my life. I also cannot tell like what era of hair this is. It's giving me like maybe late 90s, early 2000s, maybe even some 80s influence into it. But I decided to wear, you know, my pearls here, pearls on the ring, clock the ring. I'm feeling very Chanel-esque, you know, pretty and pink, bitchy, cunty, whorish. You know how it goes. So let's just begin with our first segment. I'm calling my Chanelisis, you know, like analysis, but with Chanel's. So first off, we have Chanel Oberlin, Chanel number 1, as it were, played by Emma Roberts. She plays these types of roles so well. Emma Roberts is just such a good mean girl. She's such a good bitch. I also really enjoyed her performance in American Horror Story Coven as Madison Montgomery, which is me and probably 95% of the other gay people's favorite season of American Horror Story, as it were. One of my favorite moments in the beginning is whenever she just gets up, she takes off her face mask, and she goes, "Good morning, sluts." And they say, "Good morning, Chanel." I digress. Moving on to Chanel number 2, played by Ariana Grande. This series is also kind of just a time capsule for me personally, because I was born in 2005, which means that in 2015 I was around 10 years old. And so I remember seeing Ariana Grande on Victorious and Sam and Cat, like Brain Rot, Nickelodeon shows. But seeing her in this kind of different sort of role, even though she is the first to die, spoiler alert if you haven't seen Scream Queens, but it's been 10 years, so let's wake it up. Ariana Grande, to me, this is like her break free era, if that makes sense. And so I still see her in these like high ponytails, and pobrecita, the high ponytail is just like, it has such a grip on so many artists. And I'm just like, personally, I'm tired of seeing them. So like, please help. So next we have my personal favorite Chanel, and I will say that unapologetically. We have Chanel number 3, played by Billie Lourd, and her real name in the show is Sadie Swinson, heir to the Swinson frozen dinners or something like that. That's from the Thanksgiving episode. It's like so weird, but she's also has a little secret because she is the biological daughter of Charles Manson. This is a really interesting red herring for her character because she's very deadpan. She's very just like, oh, okay, and then what? Which is why I really enjoy her. Billie Lourd is also just an amazing actor. I mean, her mother was Carrie Fisher, which was Princess Leia in Star Wars, and her grandmother is the amazing Debbie Reynolds, most remembered for her role in Singing in the Rain during the 1950s. But I personally always will remember Debbie Reynolds from Halloween Town as Grandma Aggie. She was just such a nice, sweet lady. She was also on RuPaul's Drag Race as a guest judge, so that's where this kind of like drag influence kind of ties in. And moving right along to Chanel number 5, which is the really annoying one. She's played by Abigail Breslin, who does this really amazing performance. I feel like Chanel number 5 is constantly on the verge of a breakdown, which she is because she gets bullied relentlessly by the other Chanels, but I think that's why her character works. And if you've noticed, I skipped over Chanel number 4 because, as the show states, there was a Chanel number 4, but she got meningitis. She was like, "I'm sick, I have to go home." And I was like, "No, stay." But she went home anyway, and then she died. So another thing I was right about from Chanel Oberlin during the pilot of Scream Queens. Yes, this is how much I love the show. I remember these things off the top of my head. So Moving right along to another Chanel who becomes a Chanel a little bit later during season 1, Chanel number 6, also known as Hester Ulrich, or Neck Brace as they call her in the show before she gets it removed because Chanel throws her down a flight of stairs and then it sterilizes her neck bones or whatever. It's a really convoluted story, but again, spoiler alert, if you haven't already seen Scream Queens, she ends up being the fucking killer. So Hester is such a mixed bag because whenever it comes to her as a character, she's obviously crazy and she's like literally psycho, but I think that she also plays a pretty good Chanel, if I'm being honest. I think that she has that bitchiness and like unhingedness that the other Chanels do not possess. Like Chanel number 3 is pretty low key about her being like a serial killer's daughter, and Chanel number 5 has some kind of outbursts here and there, but I think that Chanel number 6 or Hester, I'm gonna alter between those, but it is what it is, you know. Chanel number 6, Hester Ulrich, same person, if you will. And so whenever I see Hester, she has like a tameness to her demeanor, but she does have these outbursts. Like I'm sure everybody's heard on TikTok, there's a door, bitch. It's like she co-signs everything Chanel says, and the way that she plays the character is that originally Hester, whenever she's brought into the sorority house, she has this kind of motherly attachment to Chanel, and she's like, can I call you mommy, Chanel? Thank you, mommy, thank you. And it's just weird, but okay. And even later throughout season 1, we see that she even kind of threatens Chanel Oberlin, which is a big no-no. However, she does it anyway by taking Chad away from her. And, you know, Chad, I didn't really want to even talk about him too much because he's such a stupid character to me. But, you know, every kind of rich, blonde, dumb bitch has to have their rich, blonde, dumb bitch boyfriend. And so Glenn Powell plays Chad Radwell. He's this super rich dude in a fraternity. I forget what it's even called. It's like the Dickie Dollar Scholars or something along those lines. He's extremely promiscuous. He can't commit to one girl. He sleeps with everybody. You know, bada bing, bada boom, kind of typical story, if you will. But Chad Radwell is an interesting part of Chanel's story because she really does love him, if you will. I mean, in season 2, those things kind of get blurred. But apparently, she loves him in season 1 and she wants to be committed to him. She wants to be the only one that he sleeps with. And, you know, apparently that's just not the way Dickie Dollar Scholars runs, I guess. Another character that we have besides the Chanels that is also essential to the story is Grace, played by the girl that played Gigi in Wizards of Waverly Place. I don't know if anybody can get that reference, but that's where I remember her from growing up. Like I said, I'm born in 2005. I think it kind of starts to make sense. And then her sidekick, Zayde Williams, played by the amazing Keke Palmer. I love Keke Palmer's character so much in this. She's just so raw and real. And also the thing that is kind of a running joke throughout the series is that Denise Hemphill, played by Niecy Nash. Oh my goodness. This cast is just so stacked, and I love talking about the show so much. I just know so much about it, and I just grew up watching Scream Queens so much, even though I was like 10 years old, and I probably shouldn't have been, but it was still, to this day, one of my favorite comfort shows. So Niecy Nash playing Denise Hemphill adds a lot of comedic relief to the series. She's supposed to be the security guard who's supposed to protect the girls from the Red Devil Killer, but she kind of fails miserably at that, and she also just becomes a special guest star kind of character, and she, of course, thinks that Zayde Williams is the killer for some apparent reason, even though it's very obvious that Keke Palmer is nowhere near being the Red Devil Killer. And she even gets kidnapped in both seasons of Scream Queens. Zayde Williams does get kidnapped canonically, and it's like she always is trying to figure out who the killer is, but she always just gets herself into some trouble along the way, which, I mean, I'm pretty sure a lot of protagonists can relate to. And the thing that I think is super interesting about Scream Queens is that we are made to believe that Chanel number 1, Chanel number 3, and Chanel number 5, the main Chanels, are the protagonists of the series. However, really and truly, it is Grace and Zayde, and even to a different extent, Dean Munch, I would argue, played by Jamie Lee Curtis. I forgot to mention her. I will get to her, I promise. Because they are the only ones doing any good. I feel like the Chanels are just like stupid and they survive attacks here and there, but they never really do anything to find the killer. They just kind of have stupid plots and schemes that everybody kind of has to go along with for the plot. But then really and truly, whenever it gets down to it, it is Gigi and Zayde who make any kind of dents in figuring out who the Red Devil Killer is. And at the very end of season 1, whenever the Chanels go to a psych ward, it is Hester, Zayde, and Grace left standing at Kappa Kappa Tau, and Dean Munch also knows that Hester is the killer at the end of season 1, but you know, we decided to go our own separate ways, as it were, which I think is a really funny way to end season 1, and it really does have a good segue into season 2, because in season 2 the Chanels are poor. They lose all their money, all of their parents disown them, their rich families are no longer financially supporting their daughters, and so from this it's kind of interesting to see, because Scream Queens is one of those shows that just loses steam in season 2, which is very unfortunate because, like I said, it's one of my favorite comfort shows. Personally, I find myself rewatching season 1 of Scream Queens far more than rewatching season 2, but that's just probably my personal preference for having the sorority campus be the main setting as opposed to a hospital setting, which I thought was odd. I think that it fit with the story, but I did think it was a weird choice after all. But, you know, I digress. We know that Hester is one of the killers, and we do reintroduce her as a character, and we do have new killers in the Green Meanie. And that's another thing I say, is that I really don't like the Green Meanie costume. I prefer the Red Devil so much more. And if you watched last episode of Venom's Vault, you can see why I love the Red Devil costume, because it's like a really new interpretation of having a comical sort of devil mascot killer in the franchise. But I think that the Green Meanie is like, I've already seen swamp creature things, the creature from the Black Lagoon, and all those kinds of motifs of green goo. And it's kind of the same, honestly. It's like another plastic chess piece that resembles a six-pack, big green cape, and it has like a different green swampy mask. I just don't enjoy it as much as the Red Devil. And honestly, I think that the Chanels become a little bit of caricatures of their former selves in season 2, but it's maybe because we're already used to their antics. You really don't have anywhere to go, and that's where I feel like the show loses some of its momentum towards the end of season 2, especially because originally Scream Queens was supposed to be an anthology show, sort of like American Horror Story is another anthology that has a different set of characters and a different story every season, and Scream Queens was also supposed to be similar to that. But I think that Ryan Murphy kind of shot himself in the foot by using the same actors as the same characters, because we already knew what they were going to bring. Conversely, however, Jessica Lange and Sarah Paulson constantly play new characters, even though they're the same actors in different seasons of American Horror Story. And I feel like Scream Queens probably could have had some more longevity if that was the case. So, moving right along to our next segment of this episode of Venom's Vault, I want to talk a little bit more about the meat and potato characters in the franchise. So, beginning with Chanel number 1, she has really interesting fashion choices. I'm always thinking of that one like 1960s style dress, no sleeves, kind of a high cut neckline and ends right above her knee, and it has like a snake kind of intertwined into it, which is kind of a funny reference to the fact that she tries to buy a snake off of AliExpress and kill herself like Cleopatra, and it wasn't an asp, it ended up being a garter snake because it was wearing an asp sweater and would not kill her, which is interesting. But moving right along to Chanel number 3, I love her earmuffs. The earmuffs are a psychological crutch for her and her character. I like how they handled it, being like, I had a boyfriend once and he's told me that if he ever saw my ears, he would kill me. And so she just always wears earmuffs. But it's also like physical comedy to it too, because you can see parts that whenever Chanel number 3 gets flustered or shocked, she holds her earmuffs, and sometimes she even scratches her earmuffs, which I thought is really interesting and silly. And then Chanel number 5, one of the main motifs of her costume I noticed is she wears pigtails a lot, which I think also contributes to some of like the age regression that she might be experiencing, you know, having all of these other sorority sisters bullying her constantly. I feel like they do treat her in a sense like a child and also like a sacrifice. Every time it comes down to it, if one of the Chanels had to die, it's gonna be Chanel number 5, because she's chunky, she's not as pretty as the other girl, she is essentially the sacrifice. So whenever she wears pigtails constantly, it's kind of like an age regression tool for her, and it's also kind of just her sticking out like a sore thumb, because the other girls typically have their hair either in ponytails in season 2 or just down and curly in season 1. So that's kind of her being the sacrifice, if you will. And so moving on to Dean Munch, played by Jamie Lee Curtis. I told you I was going to come back to her. Jamie Lee Curtis has such phenomenal comedic timing, and that's really something that you can't teach. Her wardrobe, albeit a little bit basic, she normally, you know, she's a dean in season 1, so she wears like pantsuits and really cunty blazers and this and that. And it's also kind of same and carried out through season 2, with that being her fashion of choice. I think that I really only see her in something that's not a pantsuit whenever she actually checks herself into the Cure Institute, because she has Kuru, which I believe is a made-up disease. I've never heard of it in real life, so I'm just assuming it's either super, super rare or just entirely fictional. And so that's really the only time I see Jamie Lee Curtis or Dean Munch. Like I said, I know these actors so well, but in the same breath, I also know their characters so well. So I flip back and forth between saying the actor's name versus saying the character's name. So just bear that in mind while you watch this episode. And so I think that Jamie Lee Curtis is such an amazing actor, and that I've never really seen her in anything other than a cunty pantsuit, other than whenever she does check herself into the hospital for having her own type of illness. And I think that's also like the plot device for her having her own hospital, because she knows that she has this really rare illness, and so she wants to solve uncurable diseases to see if they can find a cure for her seemingly uncurable disease. So moving right along to another kind of side-ish, main-ish character. She's an antagonist throughout the season 2 of the series. And we have Nurse Hoffel, played by the late, great Kirstie Alley after Dancing with the Stars. And so I think that she's a great villain within the show, but it's also a sort of in-your-face kind of this is the killer sort of moment. She's not even a red herring. Nurse Hoffel kind of does rope herself into the killer narrative whenever she finds out that Dr. Cassidy Cascade, played by Taylor Lautner, who you may recognize from Twilight if you were a teen in the late 2000s like my aunt was, or personally where I recognize him from is the Disney Channel original movie Shark Boy and Lava Girl, which was one of my favorites growing up as well. And so Taylor Lautner ends up being the killer, the green meanie, if you will, because the whole plot kind of story behind it is that he was the son of Jane Hollis, who took her husband into the Cure Institute in like the mid 80s or something or another. And he ended up passing away because it was during the Halloween party and the staff didn't give a shit about her husband. So they rolled him into the swamp. Chanel number 3, my favorite, actually does fall in love with Dr. Cassidy Cascade. And I really do enjoy that plot line, because you would never expect somebody like Chanel number 3 to find love, especially in a hospital. But I guess that's kind of where you do kind of expect it, because if Chanel number 3 is going to find love anywhere, why not be at the Cure Institute? And so I think on the writer's part, this was a really interesting way to incorporate Chanel number 3 into a different part of the story, rather than just being a sorority sister with no ties attached. And I really do like that she genuinely falls in love with Dr. Cassidy Cascade. Although she does have this deadpan comedy, she does truly have feelings for him. And conversely, we do see Cassidy Cascade breaking away from his mom and like this little Oedipus complex that we see. And so with that, we see him also fall in love with Chanel number 3. I enjoyed seeing them have genuine feelings for each other, being like the two weirdo characters throughout season 2 of the franchise. I mean, other than Hester, of course, but she was a lot more expressive. And seeing Dr. Cassidy Cascade and Chanel number 3 fall in love, who are a lot more low-key characters, a lot more deadpan in their line delivery, fall in love, was super interesting to me. And I think that that was where the writers really did good on their part, you know, because season 2 kind of is a dumpster fire, as it were, which is unfortunate, but that's just kind of how the cookie crumbles. And moving on to some more fashion that was pretty iconic, Chanel number 1 kind of doesn't have a lot of outfit variety as she did in season 1, because in season 2, I believe it was a lot more low budget. So it also made sense with the story, because the Chanels are poor. They can't have a new outfit every 30 minutes. And so they did sort of recycle their wardrobe throughout season 2. So some of the promo materials for season 2, you can see them in like the hallway with like really cool camera angles. And you do actually see them wearing those costumes throughout the series, I think twice, maybe even 3 times. And so that was like a cool nod and a cool way to allude to the audience that the Chanels definitely do not have the financial support that they once did, but also kind of bringing the promotional material into the actual story of the show. And another smart move on the art designer's part, I don't really know who's in control over this. I don't really know how production works like that. But whoever did not reveal the green meanie in any of the promo material, I mean, to my knowledge, because I was obsessed with it, so I don't think I ever saw the green meanie prior to the actual show, was very smart, because we kind of set up this little mystery, as it were, because we do see Hester. We know that Hester's going to be a part of the story because she has this sort of Hannibal Lecter moment going on with her, but we never really see the green meanie, so I thought it was a pleasant surprise going into the show. And I really do wish there was some more ties to the Red Devil, some sort of connection to that part of the franchise. And we see season 2 does end on a cliffhanger with Chanel getting in her car after getting her little talk show. The Red Devil is in the back of her car, and that's the end we see of Scream Queens, because it never got a season 3, unfortunately. We are now slightly past the halfway point of episode 5 of Venom's Vault, Pretty in Pink, Killed in Couture. And so I want to introduce this segment again, Venom's Victim of the Week. And so this week's Victim of the Week, we have Miss Bean from season 1 of Scream Queens. So Miss Bean, the unfortunate housemaid of Scream Queens, and they treat her so poorly, but Miss Bean dies pretty early on in season 1, unfortunately. And she's just actually such a nice lady, but she's just treated like shit because she's below the Chanels, apparently. One of Miss Bean's most memorable moments is whenever Chanel is talking to Pete outside of the coffee shop, and she goes, Miss Bean, go organize the trash. And she like walks away in her little maid outfit, and she's like organizing the trash. And then Chanel like dramatically exits the conversation. And she said, Miss Bean, let's hit it. And then Miss Bean is like wobbling her way over there, and she goes, Miss Bean, I said let's hit it! So for Miss Bean's death, we sort of start getting the foreshadowing of it whenever Chanel and Miss Bean are at a coffee shop, and they're sort of scheming a way to get these new pledges out of Kappa Kappa Tau. And Chanel says some really politically and socially insensitive things that I'm not going to repeat. But essentially, you know, racist, Chanel. And she's like, okay, Miss Bean, we have to get them out of here because I don't want that for you. I don't want you to have to clean all of the dirty toilet seats and all of the sinks of dishes. And so of course she's going to kind of get along with it. And so Chanel proposes that they dip her head in a vat of frying oil. And of course Miss Bean is like, what? No. And then Chanel's like, no, it's not going to be on, you idiot. We're just going to dunk your face in the deep fryer, and you're going to kind of like be there and drown in it and whatever. And so the other pledges are going to get scared and leave. But somebody turns on the deep fryer, and Miss Bean's head fries. She comes up out of the deep frying oil, and she peels off her own face in such a grotesque and terrifying way that truly does scare all the pledges. Unfortunately, though, it does not scare them all out of Kappa House. It just kind of scares them, and then we're like, Chanel just killed this bitch, so what are we gonna do? And then Chanel's like, I didn't turn on the deep fryer, bitch! So that is unfortunately the death of Miss Agatha Bean. And funnily enough, we have Nurse Hoffel being Agatha Bean's sister in season 2. So there's kind of a lot of funny little plot ties together. And if you've never seen Scream Queens, I'm so sorry because you probably do not know anything of what I'm talking about other than the fierce fashions of the show. But I'm just so invested in the plot, and I always remember these little tidbits of what happens throughout the show. So I'm kind of just sprinkling them in here. So that is Venom's very second ever victim of the week in Miss Bean. So currently we're 2 for 2. I remember last week's episode's victim of the week, we had Chanel number 2 because she died so iconically. So we are currently 2 for 2 in Scream Queens as Venom's victim of the week. So let's see if next week will be any different. Okay, so for this latter half of the episode, I want to talk about a little bit where season 1 went right and where season 2 went wrong. I've been saying that season 2 kind of just lost steam and lost momentum towards the end of the series, which is true, but I just want to reiterate why season 1 slayed so hard. So the first thing that always comes to mind whenever I think of why season 1 was just so successful, in my opinion, was the casting. Every single actor had a purpose and they understood the assignment. People like Niecy Nash and Jamie Lee Curtis, they all understood the comedic timing of it all. And then having all the Chanels, you know, just be like skinny, young, blonde girls. And they had Emma Roberts, Billie Lourd, Abigail Breslin. Abigail Breslin being such a good actor is even further exemplified through her having this sort of punching bag character. And then Chanel number 3 had this really nice deadpan style comedy, kind of akin to what you would see in like The Office, but not so satirical, if you will. And then Chanel was just a bitch the entire time. And then we have the queen of not reading, Rachel Berry herself. We see how Hester had this sort of like unhinged and scary comedic effect to her. Personally, I do not stand by the actions of Lea Michele. And although it was not directly confirmed in an interview with Keke Palmer, if you know, you know, if you know what I mean. So moving on to the next segment, we have Would I Survive Scream Queens? And because this is my podcast, I have to introduce myself into all of my topics. You know, being Little Miss Chanel number 13 right now, the goth one, but still kind of pretty in pink. I have to insert myself into everything. So let's stay strictly season 1. Would Venom survive the Kappa House? Yes, but barely. And let me tell you why. I consider myself to be like a final girl in essence, but honestly, I think that I would just barely survive by the skin of my teeth. Kind of sort of like Chanel number 3, or maybe even Chanel number 5, honestly. I think that I'm definitely a comedic person, so I can add those little comedic flares and elements to the series, or whatever sort of episodes that I was in. But as a Chanel, I feel like personally, I would falter in attack scenes. I am like a 6'3" man who's over 300 pounds. So of course I could probably technically overpower the killer. But in this universe, I am completely in my drag character Venom. And Venom is a final girl in essence. But at the same time, she is like a goth bimbo in essence as well. So being like this bimbo-y, milfy character who's low-key kind of a little bit too old to be in a sorority, I would survive, but just barely. Just maybe because I have like big boobs and they save me from something every now and then, you know, something comedic and campy, but also kind of going along with the plot and the story of it all. Because Scream Queens is yet another one of those things where you have to have a little bit of a higher suspension of disbelief than you do in other sorts of more realistic media. But I mean, after all, in reality, the Chanels would have all died at the end of season 1 because they're so fucking stupid. And so I would say personally, my final answer is that yes, I would survive season 1 of Scream Queens, but just barely. I think that I would really have to have like luck, if it were, you know, like very like campy kind of 80s bimbo-y vibes. Very much like, ooh, a penny, and then I dug down, and then like an arrow goes flying over my head, or a hatchet or an axe or whatever. Just dumb luck, kind of, but still super campy and fun like the entire show is. So that is my personal opinion as to what I would do to survive season 1 of Scream Queens. I'm not really going to get into season 2 because I feel like it's just a train wreck and a mess all in the same. Well, my darlings, that is all the time we have left for episode 5 of Venom's Vault, Pretty in Pink, Killed in Couture. If you like this episode and you like this sorority carnage, make sure to follow me on all social media platforms at venom.reanimated. And if there's something, a movie, a kill scene, or anything else you would like to see me react to or talk about on a future episode of Venom's Vault, go ahead and DM me on Instagram at venom.reanimated or send me an email at venom.reanimated@gmail.com. I am anxiously awaiting your response. So if you're kind of tired of me being pretty in pink and looking like a basic bitch, me too. But do not worry, because next episode we are going to put down our glasses of wine and pick up our video game controller, because I'm going to be talking about one of my favorite video game franchises of all time. Mortal Kombat. I have personally not played every single Mortal Kombat game. However, I have played a good portion of them. So I'm going to be talking about some of my favorite games in the franchise, as well as some of my favorite characters from the franchise. And if you know anything about Venom, you can probably guess who my favorites are. But that is a topic for next week's episode. Thank you so much for streaming on Spotify or watching on YouTube this episode of Venom's Vault. I am now streaming episodes every single Tuesday, so be on the lookout for that. And I will see you next time in the vault. Bye.